hello to my favorite nerds, and happy Halloween. Around October, I like to lean into the spookier content. Fear is such a strange thing. We've evolved so far that we activate ancient survival instincts within us, but because we're not in real danger, it's somehow fun, not traumatizing. However, when you're little, a small child, that line is much blurrier. You don't know there's no real danger, and it can be traumatizing. This year, I want to embrace a classic YouTube subgenre. I want to tell you some stories about things that terrified me as a child. Things that weren't even supposed to be scary, or were just unexpected, or were not for kids. I'll try to add my own spin, solve some mysteries along the way. Welcome to a nostalgic hell, and welcome to Nothing is Revealed. For the first entry, we have to talk about... Sure, they're still around, but aren't nearly as important to generations after mine. Who needs a magazine for news and art when it's all on your phone, on Reddit? I always loved gaming magazines, and in my lifetime, many of the most prominent have died. But when my parents would buy me one at the grocery store, I would pore over every word. Until in the early 2000s, I flipped a page and saw the ad for card game Magic the Gathering. It gave me nightmares for weeks, all because of this one card. Polymorph's stunning and creepy artwork was done by artist Robert Bliss. See, Magic card art doesn't come from a single source. Dozens of different artists have been contracted over the years. I've kinda dropped the ball on investigating this one. I've combed through digital magazines and old Magic archives, and I just can't find this exact ad. I know it's real. The memory helped me find the card years later online. Maybe the nerds can help me with this. I even tried reaching out to Bliss himself. I wanted to ask him about his inspirations. But contacting Magic artists is apparently really difficult. In all the fan-made lists of artists and their contact details, Bliss is always absent, even under the silly pseudonym he used. I think I found his official site and portfolio, but never got an email back. If this is the same Robert Bliss, then he's had an extremely fruitful career as a concept artist. There was another rumor I wanted to ask Bliss about. He was allegedly notorious for hiding naughty imagery in his art. Never noticed that in Polymorph as a kid. In my quest to reach him, I got in touch with Sue Ann Harkey, ex-art director at Wizards of the Coast. She confirmed that nobody noticed these little flourishes until after millions of cards were printed. Ultimately, it became a reason why she had to stop commissioning Bliss. Wow. Another of Sue's comments also piqued my interest. Supposedly, Bliss once did amazing art for some chess game that never saw the light of day. I can find nothing about this online, and the idea of it perplexes me. Maybe that's a future episode? Robert, if you're watching, please email me. Next up, we have another dying art form. How are all these art forms dying in my short lifetime? I am talking about terrifying animatronic puppets in theme park rides. Don't get me wrong, there are still incredible animatronics in 2020. Look at Baby Yeed or the other new stuff at Disney World. But for the most part, they're too expensive to maintain for average film budgets. Even theme park rides are pivoting toward more digital-heavy experiences. But it wasn't always this way. In the 70s, 80s, and 90s, following the lead of Disney, even smaller theme parks had these incredible animatronics. Growing up close to Ohio's Kings Island, we had one ride that haunted my nightmares: Phantom Theater. Phantom Theater was a dark ride, meaning it was an indoor guided vehicle tour. You'd hop in this giant boxing glove and it would meander along a rich collection of set pieces. This thing terrified me so much my dad would try and bribe me with Pokemon cards to ride it. But even as it scared me, it sparked my imagination and paved the way for my love of horror and Halloween. It took place in a haunted, abandoned theater. Even waiting in line was spooky, but then the ride began.
You will be allowed to leave once you have heard my music. I don't think so.
My favorite bit was the boiler room at the end because it blasted you with actual heat. The ride also notably featured a Pepper's Ghost illusion, that is, one where stage glass selectively illuminates parts of a scene. Like all good nostalgic haunts, this one had an expiration date. It closed in July of 2002. They gutted all the ghouls, replaced them with new ones and a light gun system, then reopened it as Scooby-Doo and the Haunted Castle. This was also a fun childhood time, but nowhere near as creative and compelling. Then, they lost the Scooby-Doo license altogether and it changed again. And so the terrifying memories live on in my heart, like a crisp pack of Pokemon cards. Oh, and how can we forget the awesome animatronics at Chuck E. Cheese? Actually, on second thought, maybe these can go. I do find it funny that mine and past generations were so traumatized by these in particular, so much so that game developer and artist Scott Cawthorn created the Five Nights at Freddy's series. The premise is simple. You are locked in a Chuck E. Cheese knockoff all night while the animatronics try to kill you. Weirdly, and despite its core of horror, this franchise has become hugely popular with young kids, even as the number of cheap, creepy animatronics goes down in the world. Without the nostalgic attachment, what is so enticing to these kids? Is there something more primal to this fear than I previously thought? Who knows? Alright, let's speed this up. First, a rapid-fire collection of you, the viewers, and what scared you as kids. Go. Thanks for writing in. There was a PC game I loved as a kid, Nightmare Ned. Apparently, this was a TV show developed in parallel with the game, but I never saw the show, so I'll focus on the former. It was shockingly dark for Disney, and big surprise, they have never acknowledged this franchise with reruns or by adding it to Disney+. If you want to see it, you have to watch unofficial YouTube uploads. Weird. Anyway, the game was a bizarre, Tim Burton-y trip through main character Ned's nightmares, each based on different childhood fears: elementary school, doctor's office, the bathroom, attics and basements, and even a graveyard as stand-in for death. The soundtrack and effects were especially gross and memorable. They set a creepy tone and made you fear death. Even though cartoony, Ned would be electrocuted, eaten, and more. He always had this real look of fear as he was imprisoned in chalkboards, bullied, attacked by birds, attacked by taxidermy, had his organs harvested. Need I go on? Of all the squelching sounds, racing music, and scary visuals, the 4-part locker fight in the school sticks with me most.
Prepare for battle.
All of a sudden, the game has this dripping claymation style. It briefly takes on a 2D fighter setup. Ned battles a chicken, a paper skeleton, a milk carton, and whatever this is. Ugh, just hearing these sound effects sets my hair on end. Imagine being a kid and being too stupid and uncoordinated to actually fight. These things traumatized me. Go watch a full playthrough of this game online sometime. Again, despite the fear and needing my dad to play with me, it sparked my imagination. It's actually a super underrated game with a good message at heart about overcoming your fears.
Hey, man, don't look so scared. It's me, Grandpa Ted.
Gramp?
The one and only.
Are you dead?
Well, not yet. So stop the worrying. We still have places to go, things to do. Just me and you. Call me when you wake.
But this channel is kinda about the... And, surprise, surprise, there were a remarkable number of terrifying things there. For many of you watching who are just a little older or younger than me, you might have missed the golden age of internet terrors. Older, and you didn't have widespread high-speed internet in your formative years. Younger, and maybe your parents had caught on and didn't give you unfettered access. My parents had no clue. Before we dive in, the question is why? Why were terrifying things so easy to find on the early internet? Well, it's a problem that still hasn't really been solved, and that is, many platforms and sites on the internet are built for adults. But there's no bouncer at the door. There's nothing to stop children from getting on YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, any random site. And even the most carefully moderated among these are still cesspools of misinformation and gross content. As a society, we've grown more concerned about this, but the problem has scaled up to an impossible size. First off, the Ever Dream This Man's site. That's right, this was the subject of the first video I ever made. Go watch it if you want to see how the channel has evolved. And how can I forget the two most notorious jump scares of early internet? There was The Maze, a flash game that got more and more difficult. You'd move your face closer and closer to the screen to see, then BAM! Possessed Reagan. This shocked me so intensely that I still have trust issues. The other was what looked like a car advertisement. It featured a peaceful drive through a winding countryside before a creepy goblin jumped in your face. This might be the first screamer I ever saw. I always assumed it was fake, but it turns out this is a real ad. It ran in Europe in April 2005, only it was for an energy drink called Kōji. Then there were the Happy Tree Friends. Oh, how cute. An animated web series. It started with cutesy storybook animals, then it quickly devolved into a gory graphic mess as they were killed in accidental or deliberate ways. I remember a family friend coming over and showing me this, and while this person was 5 years older than me and laughed at the grotesquerie, I was thoroughly disgusted and scared. It just felt wrong that we could watch this with our parents just chilling upstairs, none the wiser. And sure enough, this was an adult series, not for kids. Even today, I'm still not sure I understand the appeal. I have one more, this one considerably hazier. It wasn't explicitly scary, more just felt wrong. I can't explain beyond that. I just felt like, as a 9 or 10-year-old, I'd found something I shouldn't be seeing. You might remember this flash game, Spank the Monkey. Now, I can see it's a dirty double entendre, but as kids, everyone loved this game. It was hosted on all the biggest sites like addictinggames.com. You can still find it there. All you do is smack the monkey with your mouse as fast as possible. However, that URL in the bottom right corner. My childhood best friend and I used to follow that link. Nowadays, it's defunct. But using the Wayback Machine, I was able to once again see what it looked like back as early as 2000. It's a little flash menu with other games. I'm stunned by some of these titles. I only remember a vague thrill of excitement and fear, none of these specifics. But it does support the theory that I was not supposed to be here. Unfortunately, none of the games are playable. Only the credits on the site remain functional. Thanks to Reddit user NinjaCo99, who found one of these games online. As he puts it, they were all comedy, innuendo, but nothing overtly not safe for work. Perhaps most interestingly, one of these contributors was none other than Scottish comedian Limmy.
Got a question for you. What's heavier, a kilogram of steel or a kilogram of feathers? That's right, it's a kilogram of steel, because steel is heavier than feathers.
He'd go on to do sketch shows for the BBC, and those sketches would go viral and become pieces of internet lore themselves. Of course, there were scary things beyond the computer, the television screen, the theme parks. When you're a kid, the world is just a scary place. Some of these I look back on fondly. What was once scary has crystallized into a sweet memory with a bittersweet nostalgia. I was terrified of the blue dragonflies that flew around my grandma's yard, but now it's a part of playing with my cousins outside. Being afraid of big dogs until I met one that knew children and was gentle. Being afraid of older kids, the principal, teachers, neighbors, coaches, turned to some of my most valuable life lessons. That's not to say it was all good. Even at the upper echelon of global privilege, a white American child from a stable suburban home, there were certain fears that lurked over all.
I take the threat very seriously. I take the fact that he develops weapons of mass destruction very seriously.
I remember in particular my first panic attack. At 10 or 11, I'd finally come to understand the existential risk of nuclear war. At Sally's beauty supply store with my mom, I froze. Couldn't move. Couldn't control my thudding heart, my racing thoughts. These fears had been fanned by a neighbor kid, one who was more troubled than I realized at the time. He used to threaten he'd alert Saddam Hussein to our presence in our little Midwestern city. One time going so far as to put a fake letter in the mailbox. My fear trumped any sort of skepticism of how silly that really was. There was the time he fed his dog whole bouillon cubes, the time he shot a BB gun through our window, the time he procured some weird, old German porno mags. As we got older, we drifted apart. At some point his family moved and we never reconnected online. Years later, when I was in college, his name came up by chance with a friend back home. His life had not gotten easier. Eventually, he took his own life. I mention him and anonymously dedicate this video to his memory because he reminds me how lucky I was. While I grew up afraid of computer games and theme park rides, he faced real fears, a legacy of abuse and neglect, a cosmic indifference to his suffering. If you struggle with the same issues, you have my deepest sorrow. Links below if you need help, and if you just want someone to talk to, email me. If you don't, count yourself lucky too. Count your blessings and savor every Halloween you have. As always, I'm glad you're here. Huge thank you to Joe Hunter for the thumbnail. Check out issue 2 of his comic Beast Heart Strikers. And to the patrons: Duns Fan, Rose, Regina, SWMan3, Darks, B. Wade, Gillian Zermer, Dominic Morrow, Laura Lou, and new patron, The Whisper in the Wind, John Michael. Thank you, patrons.
Prepare for battle.